everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'm pretty excited to be on this stage and talking what you can do with Claude on Google Cloud. So before to start, I would just want to ask you a very simple question. So how many of you used an AI coding tool this week? Raise your hand. The majority. Sounds good. How many of you used the same coding tool to build and deploy something on Google Cloud? Raise your hand. OK. Not that bad, but we can do better. And so the goal of this presentation is showing you how you can do better. But before to start, let me quickly set the stage. So at enterprise level, when you start building and you want to ship a product or new feature, you usually take a full team like this one. So in our case, let's assume that our team has a product manager that might have an idea for a new services or a new feature. And then you have a UI UX developer that start from that idea and try to render it, try to visualize it for the entire team. Of course, once the idea is visualized, then you need a software engineer that essentially build the core logic, the backend of that idea, and everything that is needed to ship it. Of course, before you ship this idea, you want to be sure that you do it confidently. So you want to be sure that you ship it in a secure way. So you drag in a security engineer that will review your code. And once the new feature or the product gets deployed, like what you want to do is that you want to have kind of a system that will allow you to collect how the user are using your new product or the feature itself to generate some insights that will allow the PM to improve the product itself. So this is kind of the team that you probably employ to build a product or this new feature. But with respect to this team, Claude, the Anthropic's coding agent, provides a set of capabilities that will essentially augment them across this entire software lifecycle. So today, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put on 5 different ads, and I will show you how you can leverage Claude models running on Google Cloud to build and deploy a simple feedback app that it will be used at the end of this session to provide me a feedback on my performance here on the stage. But before to start, let me introduce myself. I'm Ivan Nardini. I'm a developer advocate at Google Cloud. And what I do every day, essentially, I build content, in this case, in partnership with Anthropic, to enable you and developers in this room to build and deploy your own application using Google Cloud itself. So with that being said, talking about building and deploying with Claude on Google Cloud, the first thing that you need to do probably is if you use Claude Code, is setting the tool itself. So the setup, how you can use Claude models with Claude Code, but with models hosted on Google Cloud is pretty straightforward. So you have different ways, you have different methods, but the simplest one that you can get access to is the application default credential, which automatically finds some credential like the user credentials based on your environment. And then you have a wizard like the one that you see here that will detect the project and the region, verify which Claude models are available on your project that can be invoked, and let you pin them so you can use in your coding session. So at this point, probably most of you are familiar with this interface. So what are the advantages of using Claude model on Google Cloud? Well, there are many. And first of all, let me just list some of them. So first of all, if you use Claude models on Google Cloud, you pay per token. So you don't receive any message per cap. And if you need some additional capacity to run this model because maybe you're building a production application, you can always get access to what is called provisioning throughput, which essentially provides you more capacity with respect to models that we support. As I just said, using Claude models on Google Cloud is pretty straightforward. So nothing changed with respect to your environment. You don't need some API key to store or rotate or anything of these things. You get access to models directly from your dedicated project where you can set your own policy, and the data that you use during your session, they remains in that project. And models are served in multi-regions. So they can be global, they can be multi-region endpoints. For high availability, you can pick and choose depending on like where you are developing. And last but not least, talking about high availability, Google Cloud supports high quality and availability service standards with respect in serving, cloud models, making the platform itself one of the best place where you can run cloud models or get access to cloud models in the market. So I hope these are some few reasons that convince you why to consider of using cloud models on Google Cloud. But with that being said, let's start building what I just introduced you. So as I said, 5 different hats. The first one is the hats of the PM. So let's assume that you just joined the company and you have this idea for a new services. In our case, I said at the beginning, a feedback app that you want to build. So in the past, what you have to do probably is going to the UI UX team, asking for a prototype and just waiting. But now, using Claude, what you can do, you can just draft a picture while you're drinking a coffee or a tea here in London, and ask Claude to render for it. So without further ado, let's see this in action. So here is our code. I just created a Claude MD where I pass some role with respect to our PM. The goal is creating a wireframe for our UX developer, starting from a scratch. The scratch is that one. And as you can see in few seconds, he creates a prototype for it. And notice, this is a PM that probably doesn't know how to use Git, but because the way we define our environment we call code, is also able to submit this wireframe that you see here on a GitHub repository, creating a PR. So this is pretty simple, and in a few minutes, you move from scratch on a paper to a wireframe that now can be used from a UI UX developer. Okay, so let's move on. I change hat. Now I am the UI UX engineer. So the PM gives me the prototype, and from that one, what I want to do, I want to build a more solid interface for a production application. So in particular, in this case, we want to create 4 pages, starting from the landing page to the thanking page. Plus, I'm going to create a dashboard view that I will show you later to check the temperature of the room while the demo is gonna run. So in this case, in order to build these 4 pages, essentially, I used one of the components that you can find in Claude, which is the planning mode. So probably most of you are familiar with it, but with the planning mode, Claude, this mode puts Claude in a mode where he thinks and he proposes before he starts coding. And this is very important because it gives me some degree of freedom to decide what to build before Claude start building based on my personal preference. So with that being said, let's jump in the second demo. So again, I have my Claude MD. In this case, as you can see, I just provide him some description, and here I'm using the plan mode to convert the wireframe into a production interface. So what it does, it creates a sort of a spec to create those pages. Of course, in the reality, probably you connect with Figma to collect some of this information. But then let's see that I'm good with that. I just tell him to start building. He builds very quickly. And then, again, I will just submit a new PR and push my code into the repository. So pretty simple. The only thing that changed here, as you can see, as you saw, is that in this case, it creates a plan. And this is like the new kind of production-ready interface that it creates starting from that wireframe. So now we have the new PR in our repo. I just look at it. It's a very simple one. We already saw the code, so I am the same person. I know what it did. I accept and merge. OK, so let me go on and change my hat again. So now I am the software engineer. So the front end is done. Now what we want to do is package the backend and deploy on Google Cloud. As we saw at the beginning, most of you don't know how to build and deploy an application on the platform, on Google Cloud. But this is not a problem, because in the last few months, Google Cloud spent a considerable amount of time to integrate with the open vibe coding ecosystem that is fostering around Claude. And we introduced two important things. One is the official Google Cloud skills, and the other one is the developer knowledge API with the associated MCP server. So with the developer knowledge API, what you get is essentially an MCP server that will allow Claude to access to fresh documentation and implementation guides that they get refreshed every 24 hours, that will essentially allow you and Claude to build some architecture, let's say so. In this case, it's a simplified version of it, like this one. So with the developer knowledge API, you will be able to, together with Claude, to say, OK, I can deploy the API on a serverless function on Cloud Run. Then I can attach a dedicated DB for website, like file stores. And because, as I said at the beginning, we want to process the raw information that you provide with the feedback form in order to generate some insight and improve the application, I will also ingest the raw data in BigQuery, which is our analytical data warehouse, implementing a data pipeline that will essentially allow me to visualize the data in a tool like in a dashboard tool like Looker. So this you will build just together with Claude that will read the documentation and will help you to figure it out what's the best implementation to deploy on Google Cloud without you knowing about Google Cloud itself. So once you have the overall picture, then you also want to know, OK, how do I deploy on Cloud Run? Or how do I read raw records from Firestore to BigQuery? So the implementation itself, you can leverage the Google Cloud skills that we launched recently. So you will be, at the end, not only able to build an architecture like this one, but also like actually deploying it on Google Cloud. So with that being said, let's see this in action as well. Before to do that, I just want to highlight that in this case, to build the components of that architecture, I will use another components of Claude Code, which is represented by the sub-agents. In this way, I can parallelize tasks, simulating like a team sprint, and I will have one sub-agent for the API, one for the data pipeline in BigQuery, and the other one for the dashboard. OK, so with that being said, let's jump in the demo. OK. So in this case, first of all, I want to show you that I connect Claude with the MCP server for the documentation, and I have some dedicated skills. In this case, the first thing that I will do, I will ask to design the architecture and the spec of the API using the MCP server and the skills itself. So as you can see, it's querying the MCP server with a specific, asking for some specific information. And based on what he retrieves from the documentation, he builds the architecture. Then he uses the skills to create the spec for the API. So in this case, it's a very simple one. As you can see, it has different pages, different paths, and it provides you a very detailed description on the API itself. So we accept it. We have the architecture, and we have the specification for the API. The next step is parallelizing with the sub-agents and build the entire system. So as you can see, I'm using different models and different sub-agents. It's pretty quick, and it will also test the code at the end once I implemented the app, as you can see here. So it runs a test. And once they finish to run the test, it will also use an additional skills, which is the one that I was describing before, to build all the components that are needed to deploy the application on Google Cloud. So in this case, it will build a CI/CD pipeline using two of the products that we have on Google Cloud. One is Cloud Build for the CI and the Cloud Deploy for the deployment for the CD. So once it finishes, again, it creates a PR, and it pushed the PR on GitHub. In this case, because we build those CI/CD pipelines, the entire process, what it will do, it will trigger a workflow after you merge it. And the workflow essentially will be a pipeline, a building pipeline on Google Cloud. So here you can see all the steps for the API, for the dashboard. And the last step is related to the release. So once this pipeline finishes to run, it will push a new release on the continuous deployment tool. And the continuous deployment tool, it will trigger a release, as you can imagine. And in this case, because we are still developing, it will deploy the application in a development environment without, of course, requiring any promotion for now, because we are still in the in-dev environment. And this is kind of like this is the application running on the serverless function that I was saying at the beginning, and this is the same UI that I was showing you before. So far, so good. So now we have our application deployed. So at this point, the code is in the development environment. But as I said, before to move to production, we want to be confident about the code itself. We want to run a security review. Now, there are many ways how you can run the security review using Claude Code. In this case, we created a custom plugin. And that's because in a real world, probably like your company has different security review requirements. So you might want to check for the top 10 issue when you deploy an application, or if the application has something that is invalid. In the case when you deploy this kind of application in clouds, you want to check things like the service account in order to limit the permission that or the services that the application can get access to, in order to avoid any expected situation. But as you can imagine, this is just a possible scenario. So in this case, we are going to use the review to check if there is some input validation, to run some input validation, and then it will also modify the permission related to the service account, and it will deploy the application, in this case, in production. So let's see this in action as well. OK. So as you can see, I defined the plugin, and I provide some prompt to describe what it has to do. So it will start checking for the permissions, and also to check for implementing the input validation that we were saying. It will figure it out there is something wrong, so it will change the code in a couple of seconds, as you can see here. This will essentially fix the application. It will also run an additional test. And this is exactly as we did before, so that's why it's so fast. It will open a new PR, and it will push the code in our repository. But in this case, because the code passed the review, not only we will build and we will trigger a new release, but when the new release will go to our continuous deployment product, which is a Cloud Deploy, once it gets deployed in the development environment, we can also review the application one time more, and finally promote and approve it to be shipped into production. And this is something that you can quickly do using the capabilities of the product itself, of Cloud Deploy. So once you get the application in production, the result is exactly the same as I was showing you before. But again, as you can see, with Claude Code, you started from a prototype, and you were able to deploy it with respect also, on the development production kind of setting, your application on Google Cloud. So at this point, we deploy the application. The last thing that I want to do is that I want to start collecting some metrics on how you are using the application. So, for example, how long it's taking you to provide me a feedback using this application, because if it takes too long, maybe it means that my UI experience is not the best. I can improve it, right? So what we want to do is that we want to run some analytics based on the input that I receive from you. And again, as you probably don't know how to deploy an application on Google Cloud, you probably don't know how to run analytics on Google Cloud. You don't know like the analytical data warehouse in Google Cloud, which is BigQuery, as well as you don't know the dashboard tool. And so this is, again, not a problem, because as part of that integration that I mentioned before, we also, on Google Cloud, we also have now official MCP server that will allow you to essentially run analytics in BigQuery, as well as building an entire dashboard on the fly. And just to give you an idea of how powerful these MCP servers are, let me quickly show you the last demo. So this is our application that we just deployed. And just to give an idea, this is the live dashboard that I built also at the beginning. I integrated Claude to summarize some feedback. But this dashboard is more for us, right? You cannot give that dashboard to a PM, essentially. And that's why you want to build some proper analytics. So the raw data are stored in BigQuery, and you can use the BigQuery MCP server to analyze those data that I was showing you and generate some statistics around it. Now, these statistics are still in the terminal, and probably the PM, they don't like this, they want to present some numbers, whatever. So what you can do is that you can use the second MCP server that it will use those numbers to create a dashboard in the Google Cloud dashboard tool, which is Looker. And at the end of the day, thanks to this interaction, you will get just one link, and this is the dashboard that tells us, for example, how long it takes you to provide a session, and also compare different probabilistic distribution. So this is a better output that you can present in order to discuss and improve, and discuss on how you can improve the app itself. And again, even if you don't know a dashboard tool, you were able to build this using Claude Code and the MCP server that we provide. OK, so this was my last demo. So let's wrap up the session. At this point, what I tried to demonstrate today. So essentially two things. One, on the Claude Code side, you can use plan mode, sub-agents, MCP, skills, plugins in order to prototype applications like the one that I show you today and deploy them on Google Cloud. And on the Google Cloud side, apart from hosting the application itself, you can leverage, you can get access to Claude models in a way that, as you saw, makes your coding essentially frictionless for the entire session. So if you want to learn more on how you can build more complex application rather than a feedback one that I show you today, please check out the repo, the quick start, and the documentation that we are going to share at the end of the session. And I hope I cover everything. But for now, thank you so much for being here, and enjoy the rest of the event.